Hi everyone, it's Will here, your fellow car enthusiast, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to replace the battery in the 2016 to 2022 Honda HR-V. Now, the processes that I'm going to show you, they're probably the same for other Honda and Acura models, be it the Civic or the Honda CR-V. The fundamentals in terms of removing a hold-down apparatus, removing the positive and negative terminals, and maybe moving some wires or some attachments out of the way so you get clearance to remove the battery. They're all going to be the same. It just might vary depending on the placement of the battery and what's around the battery, depending on the Honda or Acura model, but it's not difficult. And I'm making this video in hopes of encouraging you to do it yourself, considering how expensive labor is. Now, for me, I personally like to replace the battery every 3 or 4 years, even if it's functioning fine. And then what I do is I just end up selling that battery on a used market for someone who might need it and for someone who might be on a budget. So I like to do that because it's a preventive maintenance thing. I don't want to be stuck with a vehicle that doesn't start in the morning if, say, I have to go to an important work meeting or if I need to pick someone up. So because I can do most repairs and maintenance myself on this vehicle, I guess I don't pay for labor, I give up time, but I still think it's valuable to get ahead of the game. And after watching this video, if you don't feel confident enough to do it, in my opinion, it still wouldn't hurt to take it to your technician to replace the battery if you know that it's already 4 to 5 years old. It just minimizes any headaches down the road. And even if you pay a little bit more money, the value is in having more peace of mind. So I trust that there's a lot of videos out there already showing people how to replace the battery on the HR-V. I wanted to make my own version for my followers and to be a little bit more detailed and to point out some areas to be careful, just so when you do it, it'll be a smooth process. So please keep watching. All right, let's talk about the tools and consumables we'll need. So thankfully nothing fancy, just a 3/8 inch ratchet with a 2.5 inch 10mm deep socket, a 10mm gear wrench. You can use a regular box end wrench, but the gear wrench is a little bit more helpful, and I'll show you why later. Pair of pliers just in case you need. Some dielectric grease for the battery terminals to protect them. And me personally, I use something called battery terminal protector. It's a spray, it's quicker, it's easier, it's less messy. Just a personal preference, but you can do just fine with Vaseline or dielectric grease. So in terms of starting the job, the first thing to do is to remove the battery hold down. So we're going to be getting at that 10mm nut. It might be a little bit rusty, and that's where you need a little bit of WD-40 to penetrate before you start loosening the nut. So this is where we need the deep socket. That's where it's useful. Having the ratchet is a lot easier to use, so it might be a little bit tight. My advice is to go back and forth if you feel a lot of resistance, the loosening tightening technique I call it. And you just want to be careful, because the worst case is that if it's really rusty, that whole top part of the rod can break off, and that can be a problem. So here I'm using my gear wrench with a pivoting head, and you can get by with this, but it's not as friendly to use. You don't get as much leverage, so using the ratchet with the deep socket is better, a lot better. Once you start using it, you'll understand. So once you get that nut off, the other side, there's this plastic hold down bolt that's kind of in the way there. So you just got to use your ratchet to break it loose a little bit, and then usually you can just pull it up and off. And now you can get at that nut. So again, just be really careful. And you can see the rod there. That's how it hooks on. There's a little hole there. And then we just want to loosen that nut so we can have some space for that hook to basically separate from the hole there. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I have a power ratchet. It's a lot quicker. I just loosen it a little bit. You don't have to go all the way, just enough that the hold down plate there is moving a little bit, and so you do it on both sides. Mine come off easy because I put a little bit of lubricant on there prior. So you can see there, I'm just gonna try to show you, hopefully it's visible. You can see how it hooks on, so there's a little bit more play now, and you have to try a little bit. You just kind of have to twist it and turn it, and you might have to loosen the nut a little bit more to get more space, but you just have to persist a little bit and eventually it comes off. Okay, so in my case here, it did separate. I just had to kind of turn in towards the battery, and now it's away from its hole. It's not hooked anymore, so I can get the other side too. So before I do that though, we can now take off the terminals, okay? So very, very important. Always take off the negative battery terminal first, okay? So go counterclockwise. Again, that's where the gear wrench is useful. You can use the ratchet as well, but the gear wrench is a little bit better. So once you get that negative terminal off, just put it out of the way. Make sure it's not touching the terminal on the battery there. And now we can get at the positive terminal. So the positive terminal has almost like a bolt. It's not really a nut. So you just have to loosen it as well. Again, counterclockwise. Just give it a little bit of a turn and it'll loosen. And you might have to wiggle while pulling up, okay? And eventually it comes off. Just be careful with this terminal, all right? So it just comes off like that. You just move it gently out of the way. And if you're curious about that little green piece there, it's just a piece of felt that I personally use. You don't really need it. It's just used to seal battery gases to prevent corrosion. So you don't really need it. You could use it, but I'm just picky. So now with the terminals out of the way, you just have to move the battery there. You can also pull off that harness there if you need more space, but I didn't have to in this case. So with the terminals off, you just have to work the hold down out of the way. So you can see there, you just have to wiggle it a little bit and eventually it comes off, okay? So that's how it looks. And then we just put it out of the way and now we can pull the battery out. So be very, very careful when you're pulling it out. You might need someone to help you just hold that positive terminal so it's out of the way. And then you just lift the whole assembly off. And that little piece covering there, that's just an insulator. You don't really need it when you put it back. I just kept it, but that's the battery tray. So that's what the battery sits on. It might not be a bad idea to clean it off if you're picky. You don't have to, but there's something I do want to point out though. So there's a little hook piece that's on one corner of the battery hold down, and that hook is meant to hold the wiring loom for the positive terminal. So it's just to secure it, so when you install the battery, it's not moving around, okay? So when we put this back in, that wiring loom will have to fit back into that little hook. So I just want to point that out, and that's how the bottom plate looks like. It's a little bit oily because I put some rust proofing material on it, but once you put it back in place, again, you might have to play around with it a little bit. There are two prongs underneath that holds it in place, and you'll know once it's secure. And again, you just have to make sure that positive terminal wiring loom fits into that hook before you put the battery back, okay? So where my fingers are right now, where I'm pointing, those are where the prongs are. That helps hold this tray in place. So the rest of the job is pretty easy at this point. You just have to make some space. Again, might help to have a friend or a family member help you hold that positive terminal so it's out of the way, and then you just have to reposition the battery, your new battery. In this case, I'm just showing you guys how to do it. So I'm putting in my existing battery back in. So once it's in place, you'll know it won't move around too much, and then you just have to look and make sure that it's seated evenly within the battery tray, or on top of the battery tray rather. And in my case, I'm good here. So once you get it in place, it's now time to put the hold down kit back in, okay? So make sure that positive terminal again is in place where that little hook is that I showed earlier. And yeah, now we're ready for the hold down kit to go back in. So again, you just have to position those rods to hook onto the hole at the base of the battery holder. So it might take a little bit of time, just be patient. You'll eventually get it. And once you get it in place, there's gonna be some slack, right? So what you wanna do is you wanna grasp the rod and basically push up as you start tightening. And I'm just using the deep socket by hand because there's a lot of slack that I gotta get through. You need a little bit of tension before you could start using the ratchet. So you do the same thing on the other side too, and then just showing you guys here where you can position the rod so it hooks into the hole there. So eventually, once you get that, again, just hold it up in place so the hook is bracing against the hole, and then again, you use your hand just to take up the slack. And once you feel a bit of tightness, that's when you can use the ratchet to finish tightening down, okay? Okay, so this is just a closer look down there of what's going on there. So you just want to make sure that the rod there is hooked onto its hole and we tighten it down a little bit so it's fairly secure. And at this point, you just want to make sure that it's not moving too much, and then we can start tightening down with the ratchet. So one important thing, it's very easy to over tighten because the battery's case is plastic. But the thing is, you just want to go a little bit at a time on one nut and then go back to the other and then keep switching. You just want to tighten it down evenly. And it's fine if you don't feel any resistance, just make sure it's tight like that. As long as it's tight like that, even if the ratchet is still turning, it's good enough, okay? You don't want to over tighten it, again, just because the battery casing is plastic. So you can see there it's pretty tight, so we're good. So now we can put the terminals back on. So always put the positive terminal back on first. The rule is positively first, as my auto shop teacher once told me. So you want to just work it in carefully, the positive terminal, and you want to get it to seat down as far as possible. And once it's in position, then you can start tightening down with your ratchet, or you can use your gear wrench. The gear wrench is a little bit easier to maneuver. There's a little bit of slack here, a little extra slack, so I'm just using my deep socket to take up the slack a bit before I lock it down with the gear wrench, okay? So you don't have to make it too tight. My rule is, as soon as you feel resistance, just have your finger there in the middle of the wrench and give it a little bit of elbow grease, and then that's all you need, okay? As long as it's not moving when you're trying to turn it, that's good enough. And same thing for the negative terminal, okay? You just want to make sure that it's seated down as far as possible at the base of the terminal. And then once you have it in place, just hold it down and then use your gear wrench or socket to tighten it down clockwise, okay? So again, the rule there, just have your thumb or finger there in the middle, press as hard as you can, and that's all the resistance you'll need. And then put back that little attachment piece on the rod and just make sure it's tight, and you're done in terms of the hands-on stuff, okay? So the final thing to do is when you start up the engine, the good thing is that even when you disconnect the battery, it still remembers your radio presets. The only thing you'll have to do is, I'm gonna show you in a second here, as soon as it comes up on the screen, you have to hold the on-off switch for like 3 seconds in order to reset the navigation stuff. So this navigation stuff is just so the car knows what time it is. And the other thing you might have to reset as well is your gauge brightness once you disconnect the battery. But all your radio settings are still remembered. They're not forgotten like how old cars used to be. So that's all you need. So if the engine starts, you're done.